you guys getting on to join us this evening. We're going to start this virtual candidate forum for circuit court judges. One moment, please. I'm okay, I'm sorry. I had background noise I had to address. Let me just say that if you're watching via YouTube or Facebook Live, we welcome you to submit questions using the comments block. We have a few folks that are with us this evening screening questions. They will be looking at each question for their appropriateness and something that each of our judges or candidates can answer. We also will be prioritizing them because our time is limited. We know we won't get so many questions in, so we want to try to get the most exciting and interesting questions first. The purpose of this forum is to provide an opportunity for every resident, citizen, and eligible voter in the county have all the information they need to be responsible and informed electorate. We want them to know who you all are as judicial candidates, and we want them to know something about you, the way you think and process information, and the way you adjudicate law. We will try to offer questions that will give a broad-based perspective of that, and every question will be a question that each candidate will have an opportunity to answer. There will be time limits on questions simply because it's a short form. We don't have a lot of time. I would remind you that this is not a debate. It's simply a question and answer session. You would be better served to respond to questions and not necessarily to each other. I want to remind those that are viewing and listening that we do have sitting judges with us, and because of that, there are questions relevant to political affiliations, attorney or litigant situations, ongoing trials, or even past trials for that matter, that aren't appropriate and they cannot and should not answer. And if we can help it, we won't ask. So please limit your questions to those things that are pertinent to us understanding who these people are and how they will help us as residents and citizens of the county to navigate the circuit court of Montgomery County. Okay, that being said, we're going to now open the floor for introductions. We're going to ask you each to use 2 minutes to introduce yourselves and share a little bit with our those who are listening. And after we finish with the introductions, we'll go into the questions and answers, okay? We will start with a very simple order based on who is on the screen, on my screen. So we will start with Judge Michael McAuliffe. All right. Then Judge Christopher Fogleman, Judge David Boynton, Judge Thomas Johnson, Judge Bibi Berry, and I believe that is it for now. Hopefully, I think there's one more candidate. Hopefully, they'll join us shortly. But let's go ahead and get started. So, Judge McAuliffe. Right. Before you start, let me just say, I have a timer here, and it's going to time the 2 minutes. Okay. When the 2 minute timer goes off, you may not hear it, but I'll hear it, and I'm going to wave at you. Okay. And I'm going to give you just a moment or two to be done. And then with great love and affection, I will mute you. So just know that, okay?
Gotcha.
And if you're not speaking, if you could mute yourself, that would help us listening. Okay, Judge McAuliffe, thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'm Judge Michael McAuliffe, and I was born in Washington, D.C. We moved to Montgomery County when I was a child. I went to high school in Wheaton, and then I attended the University of Notre Dame. When I was a senior at Notre Dame, my father was stricken with cancer, and I came home to Rockville to spend the last few months of his life with him. I lived in Rockville with my family, I worked in Rockville, and I attended Georgetown University Law School. In 1987, my friend Jack Quinn and I started a law firm in Rockville. For 32 years, I was a trial lawyer in Montgomery County. People came to me with the worst problems they could ever have. They came and said things like, my son just killed somebody, can you help me? Or my marriage is exploding, can you help me? That's the kind of thing I did for 32 years. Now, as a trial judge, those cases come before me. I hear those cases, and I have to make the tough decisions that go into those cases. I love Montgomery County. I've lived in Silver Spring for a long time now. We've raised our 3 children there. My wife and I have raised our 3 children here. Thank you very much for having us here this evening. And thank you for inviting us into your living room, so to speak. And thank you to Ms. Powell and Reverend Moultrie for hosting this event. Did I clear the 2 minutes?
You still have 30 seconds left.
Oh, okay. Well, I would bring up the fact that in that 32 years of trying cases, I've worked for an awful lot of people in Montgomery County. Some of them may be watching tonight, I don't know. But I think I'm known as somebody who worked very hard for people and people who made sure that people had a fair shake. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Judge Fogleman. You need to unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Reverend, and thank you, everyone that's watching this evening, for giving us the opportunity to speak to you about our experiences and what makes us people that are of the caliber that should be on the bench here in Montgomery County. I was born in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, the home of Little League Baseball. The 6 to 7 children. At the age of 12, unfortunately, my father passed away, and my mother raised us, the last 2 of us, by herself. Neither of my parents had a college or a high school diploma. I was the first in my family to go to college. My wife and I got married in 1981, and we moved here. I went to law school. I put myself through college and law school on loans. My wife and I have raised 5 children here in Montgomery County. We together have been very active in our community, and we are very much a part of the fabric of Montgomery County. I was an assistant public defender for 3 years. I was in private practice for 30 years. I've been on the bench for about 15 months now, sitting primarily hearing family cases, which are largely divorce cases, child custody, child support, and probably most significantly, domestic violence cases. It is an honor to be on the bench, and it's been a privilege to be able to work for the people of Montgomery County, and I look forward to continuing to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Judge Boynton.
Hi, good evening, and thank you very much for having us here tonight. I'm Judge David Boynton of the Circuit Court for Montgomery County. I've been on the bench now for 17 years, and I'm the senior most judge on the bench. I have probably the broadest experience of any judge in the state, having handled thousands of hearings and trials and having served anywhere between 3 to 5 years in each of our 4 rotations, which is criminal, civil, family, and juvenile. I'm running in this election so I might continue to serve in our community. Before going on the bench, I was a trial attorney for 20 years. I served for 17 years as an assistant state's attorney in Montgomery County, prosecuting violent crimes. I also spent 3 years in private practice handling both civil and criminal cases. During my time as a trial attorney, I tried hundreds of trials, gaining the experience necessary to know how to conduct a trial once on the bench. I also volunteered to serve in many community and professional organizations. Growing up, I was one of 5 children. I was born and raised in Montgomery County, started in Silver Spring. We eventually moved to Rockville, where I attended public schools, eventually graduating from Magruder High School. I was very active in school activities, team sports, my church, and the Boy Scouts. I went to college in Pennsylvania, where I was a business major, and then I went to law school in Baltimore, where I learned how to think and prepare myself for my legal career. On a personal note, I'm married with 4 adult children, 3 daughters and 1 son. I was very active in coaching and volunteering in all of their activities of interest. My wife is a lawyer who worked for the Treasury Department. All my children live in the area, all have flourishing careers. 3 of them are married. I have 1 grandchild and 2 more on the way this summer. I have devoted my entire career to public service, and it has been the greatest opportunity, privilege, and honor to serve as one of its judges. I look forward to serving another term.
Done. Thank you, sir. David Boynton. Judge Boynton.
That was Judge Boynton.
I just finished.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thomas Johnson.
Mount Calvary Baptist Church, and the audience in attendance. I will appear on the ballot as Thomas P. Johnson III for Circuit Court Judge of Montgomery County, Maryland. I've been practicing law since 1993. Solo practice litigation. My legal career started out working for legal aid in New Orleans. I hold a BA degree in political science from Marymount College, North Andover, Massachusetts. Earned a doctorate Juris Doctorate degree from Southern University Law Center, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, historic Black College University. Hold law licenses in the District of Columbia, Louisiana, and Maryland, representing clients in administrative, federal, and state court proceedings. Admitted to practice law before the U.S. District Court of the District of Columbia, Eastern District of Louisiana, U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Maryland, U.S. Bankruptcy Court of Maryland, U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Affairs. I'm seeking this position based on my legal experience as an attorney. I would apply the law equitably, reasonably, using common sense with its application. My candidacy is I'm financing my own candidacy. As a judge, I will act independently without the appearance of favoring those who have made financial contributions to my campaign. If elected, I would be the first African-American male judge on the Circuit Court of Montgomery County in approximately 6 years. The population of Montgomery County is one of the most diverse in this state. I am embarrassed by the lack of an equally diverse representation on the bench as a member of the legal profession and as a resident.
You got 10 seconds. You done, sir?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Judge Berry.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Mount Calvary Baptist Church. Thank you to the Lincoln Park Historical Foundation for inviting us. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Phoebe Berry. I'm a Montgomery County Circuit Court Judge. I was appointed to the court as a judge in December of 2019, and I've been a judge for a little over 4 months. I've actually been on the circuit court for 2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years. In 2017, I was appointed to the circuit court bench as a family magistrate. Family magistrates, they preside over family cases. They do some of the same things that judges do, and you actually learn judicial bench skills. You have to apply those same skills as a magistrate. Before that, I spent 15 years as a litigator, and I was equity partner at Cayley Rothman, which is a law firm, a prestigious law firm in Bethesda, Maryland. My legal career spans over 24 years. I put myself through Georgetown Law School after graduating from Howard University undergrad. I worked full-time during the day as a legal assistant, and I went to school at night. I was a single parent of a toddler at the time. My career has been spent learning my craft and becoming a better litigator, but also I dedicated my time to broadening my perspective and giving back to the community through service to various bar associations, by teaching, by mentoring, and things like that. I also wanted to, when I envisioned my career, I wanted to be part of a professional community and do more than just litigate cases. So in 2017, I realized that my path was leading me to something broader, my own practice, where I could have a greater impact and do right by this community. I'm grateful for the opportunity I've been given. I love my job. I'm committed to this community, and I'd like to see that commitment through.
Thank you, Judge Berry.
Continue working for you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have some questions that have been coming in already. So we're going to go to the first question. You should see it on your screen as I read it, and then we will go through each judge in the same order that we just, each candidate in the same order that we just went through. The first question: please explain your philosophy of public involvement and practice of giving your time to community service. How do you anticipate your personal philosophy would translate to your service as a Montgomery County Circuit Court judge? Judge McAuliffe. I'm sorry, you have 1 minute to answer this question. And you need to unmute yourself, sir.
Okay. My philosophy of public involvement. I've been involved in the Boy Scouts. I've been involved in St. Jude Catholic Church for many years. We just opened St. Stephen's Pantry, which is a food bank in Aspen Hill, Maryland. I'm one of the people opening it and helping to run it. I think that personal involvement is really important. You can't just send money. You have to be personally involved. People want to see you, and they want to see you working for other people. That translates to service in Montgomery County Circuit Court, because I'll see people who know me. People know me when they come in. People know I can count on that guy. That's part of the personal philosophy of service that really matters when you're a circuit court judge. Your whole job is there to serve the community. That's what you're there for. And I think people need to count on you. When they know that they see you out in the community doing things like the St. Jude Food Bank, like the Boy Scouts, like coaching little girls in basketball that I did for so many years, they see that and they know that.
Thank you, Judge.
I'm sorry, I'm over the 1 minute. Thank you.
Sir, Judge Fogleman.
Thank you. So I've been involved in youth sports I'm in my 27th year with the Burtonsville Athletic Association, holding every role in that organization that there is, including coaching. And I'm still coaching, and I'm proud to say that my 4 now adult sons all coach with me. Even though we don't have any children playing or any family members playing, we're still involved in coaching. I've also been involved for many years with the Montgomery County Juvenile Justice Commission. I'm still there as an emeritus member. I served 4 years as the president or the chair of that organization. I think it's extremely important to be able to be involved in these types of activities. That's what shapes our philosophy, my philosophy on the bench. It's one of service, and I look forward to continuing to serve the community as a judge.
Thank you, sir. Judge Boynton.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute. I think community service is a big part of becoming a well-rounded person so that you can serve on the bench. I've spent my entire adult life in community service of coaching in sports, Stepping Stone Shelter, Habitat for Humanity, Rockville Chamber of Commerce, to name a few. Close to the heart of Mount Calvary Baptist Church, I helped build a house there for Habitat for Humanity back in 2001 and 2002 for the Odolami family that lives at 129 Johnson Drive. My children and I spent weekends there for an entire year building that house and meeting people in Lincoln Park and helping the Odolamis eventually own the house of their dreams right there in the back, at the back of the parking lot of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church. So I greatly enjoyed it, as did my children.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Johnson. Yeah.
Thank you, Judge Moultrie. I've been involved in community service. One time in Montgomery County during the housing crisis, I assisted families that had financial problems. I've also been involved with my son's great middle school, Washington Episcopal School. I was PA president, and also I was on the board of trustees at Washington Episcopal School. I was embedded in that school, and also when he went to high school. My wife and I, a wife of 28 plus years, and my son now is in college. I have been involved with education. I taught high school in New Orleans at St. Augustine High School, and I'm currently mentoring 2 young men in law school. Community service is part of my fabric. I always give back. It's not financially always, it is myself.
Thank you, sir. Judge Bibi.
Hi. So I served on the Bar Association's, Montgomery County Bar Association's Judicial Selections Committee at one point, and on the trial court's nominating commission. That's the governor's commission after that. And one of the things that, as we vetted candidates, we thought was extraordinarily important is the extent to which they gave back to the community. That was very important to me as I was vetting. That was very important to me in my career. Most of my service was through the bar associations. A lot of people don't know how much bar associations do for the community. They provide programs that give people access to justice, community service programs like feeding the homeless, like charity walks and education programs, and I was always involved in that. It was very important. So my resume is littered with that type of involvement. I think that it's important that when you get onto the bench, you don't go away. You stay.
Thank you so much. Your time is up. I beg your indulgence. I'm going to, just because I know how difficult this transition has been for all of us, I don't have a name here, so I'm going to admit this. I know that, what's the name? Marylin Pierre has been trying to get in and has been having challenges. And so, is this Marylin Pierre? I'm trying to print the audio for it. Is this Marylin Pierre? Hello, is this Marylin Pierre?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
So we've already started, and only because I know that you called here before 8 o'clock, and we've been trying to get you in. We're going to let you spend 1 minute to introduce yourself, and then we're going to proceed with the questions. So if you could now just take 1 minute and introduce yourself as you approach. 10 seconds left, I'll wave my hands in front of you, and you can wrap up at 1 minute. I'll try to stop you. And if I can't stop you, I can mute you. Okay. So if you go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Marylin Pierre, and I am running for Montgomery County Circuit Court Judge. For over 28 years, I have been representing people just like you get justice out of a legal system that doesn't make their problems the top priority. Because of my good judgment and legal experience, the Montgomery County Circuit Court appointed me as a family law facilitator where I helped families solve their disputes. With this experience, I have learned what judges do. Judges solve problems. The job of the judge is to find the best solution to the problem That takes wisdom and knowledge about the people and the programs and services that best are able to solve the problems. What I will bring to the circuit court is the wisdom gained as an immigrant child who worked hard and got into one of the most respected law schools in the country. What I will bring is the wisdom gained raising 3 successful children, the wisdom gained struggling to earn a living,
Thank you, Ms. Pierre. That's your minute. So let's go on to the next question, and each of you in turn will have the next question. You'll have 1 minute to answer this question. There are questions that you'll have more time for, but these they've allowed me 1 minute per person. This question: globally, and nationally, and locally, we are all feeling the effects of COVID-19. To what extent should a judge consider political, economic, and social consequences of decisions? Judge McAuliffe?
Well, setting aside the issue of COVID-19 for the moment, we never, ever consider political consequences of a decision. That's totally improper for any judge to consider. It's ethically improper, and no judge I know would consider it, no real judge. Economic and social consequences of decisions, that really depends on the individual case. You have to consider what is the impact of this decision on these individual people. If it's child support, if it's alimony, if it's a criminal case and you have to decide in terms of probation or a fine, you really have to consider the economic and social consequences of these decisions. I want to be careful in talking about COVID-19. I can't give an advisory opinion about what I might rule in the future. That would not be proper. But I do think you consider the consequences of these decisions on individual litigants. Okay.
Thank you. Judge Fogleman.
Thank you. First of all, I completely agree with Judge McAuliffe. We're not permitted to consider political, in particular, consequences of decisions. We're bound to make decisions based upon the law, and we have to apply the law to the facts as we find them, and that's what we strive to do. That's what I strive to do in every case. And to the extent that we do have an issue with COVID-19 right now, it factors in primarily with respect to ensuring that everyone has access to the court system. Particularly, for example, in the domestic violence area, we want to make sure that everyone has access to the court, and we have remote capabilities to make sure that those cases are heard and decided, and nobody has to fear living in a dangerous place because of the court closure at this time with COVID-19.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Judge Boynton.
Thank you. Well, obviously, we can't consider political ramifications for any of our decisions. Our decisions have to be based upon the facts of the case that are presented to us, without regard to the broader economic or social consequences of the decision. We have to consider how it's going to impact the litigants in the case in front of us. As it relates to COVID-19, we have considered that locally, in that we've taken that into account in deciding to release inmates from our local detention center based upon the existence of, or the potential exposure to COVID in the jail. So we've reduced our population by about 50% based upon that potential. So that's one example of how we consider COVID-19 and other types of things in our decision making.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Johnson.
Politics should be out of all decision making, as the judges have rightfully said, spoken about. My interest with COVID-19 would be the best interest of the people that's before me, and I would apply the law as the law is written. And when I say best interest, consideration should be given, whether or not you should incarcerate someone for nonviolent crime, in terms of exercising bail. Considerations, as I said again, should be in the best interest of the person before me, and also in family matters. We have now in the situation that we're in, Courts can be held via teleconference.
Thank you, sir. Judge Berry.
Thank you. I echo the comments about political considerations. We can't go anywhere near that. With respect to social and economic considerations, I certainly can't make decisions and wouldn't make decisions that involve any consideration of myself. And considerations of from the broader perspective generally are going to be made by the legislature. But every day we make decisions, particularly, I can point particularly to the family arena. We make decisions that have a social and economic impact on the people that come in front of us. And you certainly consider the impact that those decisions have, whether it be social, economic, or any other kind of personal impact that it has on those folks.
Thank you. Ms. Pierre. I'm sorry, I'll unmute you.
Thank you. As everyone has already stated correctly, someone's political standing doesn't really have anything to do with the decisions that judges should make. COVID-19 is especially personal to me because my uncle has died from it. My husband's brother-in-law has died, and I have a client who has it in his house, and my client's son has it in Rockville. So it is a very personal thing. And so the social and economic consequences of something like that is not evenly distributed between everyone. And there's some people who are not feeling no consequences at all economically because they are currently working at the same job that they were working at and they're still getting paid. Yet there's some people who cannot afford to put food on the table because they no longer are able to work.
That's time, Ms. Pierre. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question, we're going to allow 2 minutes each for this question. In the area of hate crimes, how do you balance issues of free speech against the need to protect the victims from offensive activity? Judge McAuliffe?
Whoop.
I'm sorry, let me unmute you.
Thank you.
If you guys could do that for yourselves.
Oh, okay.
That would help me out tremendously.
Okay, will do. Well, in the area of hate crimes, the first thing we do is we follow the statute. The statute describes exactly what a hate crime is. And it's really an emphasis on sentencing, where someone can be sentenced more harshly if they commit the same action. But if it qualifies as a hate crime, the legislature has decided that free speech stops when hate crimes start. And you have to draw that line, you have to follow that line that the legislature drew. So I don't get to invent my own law on this. I have to follow what the legislature said. And I think it's fair to say that the legislature drew that line. They said freedom of speech stops when hate crimes start. And that's the line that I would draw because that's what the legislature found. And that's what our law in Maryland is. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Fogleman.
Thank you. And again, I'm going to agree with Judge McAuliffe because we are constrained to a large extent by the laws as the legislature has enacted them. And that's the process that we have in this country. The First Amendment guarantees free speech, among other things. And I certainly value that, but I can't give weight to that over what the legislature has determined by statute is appropriate for protection of victims from offensive activity and from hate crimes.
All right, thank you. Judge Boynton.
Thank you. I'll agree with the two previous speakers and just indicate for the audience that free speech is really a civil concept emanating from the First Amendment, whereas a hate crime is really a criminal concept, which where the legislature has decided that under certain circumstances, if the targeted individual is based upon race or some protected class, then they're going to enhance the penalty for committing the same type of offense. So free speech is not a defense to a criminal act. It's two different concepts, so they don't really come into contact with one another. And as trial judges in Maryland, we're not called upon to decide law like an appellate court would be, but rather we're called upon to follow the law that's been enacted by the legislature. So it's not really an issue that's going to come up before us very often in court. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, I will follow the law as it is written by the legislature, but you have to look at the facts, and each fact and circumstance are different when you get them. So it's difficult for you to say, well, okay, I have a hate crime here, I have free speech here. Free speech, it starts and hate crime stops it. So I would apply the law as it is written. I can't deviate from the law.
Thank you, sir. Judge Berry.
Yes. So one of the problems with hate crimes is that it scares not just the person against whom the crime was committed. It creates a fear that blankets communities. It doesn't just have an impact on the person, it impacts the entire community. It spreads and infects, and it encourages crime. And so you do have to, obviously you have to follow the law, and you do have to make determinations about intent and about what it is that the person has actually done to balance the issues of free speech, which is very, very important against the need to protect the community against this type of offensive conduct.
Thank you. Ms. Pierre.
Free speech is very important to me. And I think it also was important to the founding fathers. That's why they put it in the First Amendment. However, free speech has some limits. And as a judge, people are restrained by the precedents that were put before them. So yes, everybody has a right to free speech, but when that free speech hinders the right and safety of somebody else, then that free speech is no longer, that free speech has passed what is necessary to protect what is in the Constitution. And so that's why I think that, yes, there is free speech, but no, the free speech cannot go into hate crimes where it injures and causes harm to other people.
Thank you. Just one moment, please. It's a fair question. It's a fair question. So this next question, I recognize that some of you are currently on the bench and some of you are not, but still the question I think is applicable. While serving on the bench, do you believe you have a role, or what would your role be in bringing important legal or judicial issues before the public or the legislature? Why or why not? What should your role be? And so in framing that question just a little bit, I want to say to you that right now in Montgomery County, there are pockets of young people that are gathering in violation of the current laws. And after being challenged, we're finding out that they're not wanting to be at home because of domestic violence at home. Is there not anyone that can be an advocate for these children? The folks that are perpetrating domestic violence aren't being arrested. They can't get into court. Is there someone that has a role in speaking up for these children and trying to find a way to help them be safe at home? That's just my addition to the question. The question stands as it's read. I'll give you 2 minutes each to respond to that question. Judge McAuliffe. Okay, let me unmute you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. First of all, the courts are open for domestic violence, and it worries me very much what you said, Reverend, because people have the impression that if there's domestic violence in the house, they just have to take it. That's not the case. The courts are open. The courts are open. We are hearing domestic violence cases. Those are not being turned away. And it's a misunderstanding that people have that somehow I just have to live with this domestic violence. That's not correct. We issue domestic violence orders every day in the Montgomery County courts, and we are open to that. So I would hope that we can tell these young people, if they are victims of domestic violence, that there's a remedy for them. That is one of the emergencies that we stayed open for. So absolutely there is a remedy for them, and I hope they will take advantage of it. Secondly, on a more broader question, the written question has to do with important legal or judicial issues. The rules of judicial ethics are very strict about what we're allowed to comment on. For the most part, I've learned to keep my political and opinions to myself, because it's important that a judge not take a political stance. That issue might come before me, and you can't have a judge who's already weighed in on the issue and hasn't even heard the evidence yet. So the ethical rules that apply to judges are very strict on when we can voice our opinion and when we can't. And it's very rare that we're allowed to express an opinion on important legal or judicial issues. But one of them that we can express an opinion on is access to justice. And I want those young people to know they do have a remedy. And the police will direct them to the commissioner's office that will get them to a judge. And we will issue domestic violence orders, notwithstanding any COVID-19 issues. They will be issued, and people can get protection. So if we take nothing else out of this tonight, folks, please remember, the courts are open on domestic violence issues, and please take advantage of it. You do not have to sit there and take it or live with it or shelter in place with domestic violence. I would never ask someone to do that.
Thank you, sir. Judge Fogleman.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to echo Judge McAuliffe's comments. The courts are open, and just as an example of this, shortly after the courts closed, for most matters, I had a contested hearing on domestic violence, and it involved a minor child that was the victim. And we spent 3 hours in that hearing doing it telephonically with interpreters, and it was a challenge, and it took probably 3 times longer than it would have under normal circumstances. But we did it, we got through it, and we did what we needed to do to make sure that that case was heard and decided. In terms of getting issues before the public or the legislature, that is really not our role. Our role is to be impartial arbiters and to make decisions based upon the facts and apply the law to the facts as we find them. In my capacity on the Juvenile Justice Commission for many years, that's where I had the opportunity, before I was a judge, to advocate for minor children, which I did on many occasions. That body has the ability to actually lobby the legislature. We meet with those days we met with the judges, and I'm on the other side of this, and I'm one of the judges meeting with them. But we met with the judges, we met with different agencies, including the Department of Juvenile Services, people at the Noise Center, which is the detention facility for young adults, and other people involved, other stakeholders involved. And we did quite a bit to make sure that the legislature heard us, and the legislature was concerned about, which I know they are, and took very careful consideration of juveniles in the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Judge Boynton.
Thank you. So to address your question specifically, Montgomery County has a Child Protective Services division that respond to complaints for neglect and abuse of children. And even during the times of COVID, they have the authority to remove children and to place them and provide services and protection. So that is up and running. There's also the Family Justice Center, which coordinates to make that happen. In terms of the general question that was asked, it's not the role of judges to bring important legal or judicial issues before the public in the sense of broadcasting or lobbying in that way, but the courts as a branch of government have a legislative arm, and we work with the legislature in passing new laws that benefit our community. So if an issue arises and we send it to our legislative committee, an example of that is the bail reform that occurred a couple years ago, because it was becoming apparent that cash bails were disproportionately affecting poor people. And so the courts were involved in rewriting that law so that now the least restrictive requirements are placed upon individuals who are arrested, and they're either released on their own recognizance, or if they're a danger to the community, they're held without bond. But it was due to the court's involvement that the cash bail system has pretty much been done away in the Maryland courts, and that's one way in which we get involved in bringing to the attention of the public issues that we see in court. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, I would, as a circuit court judge, I would make sure that Child Protective Service is working. I know for a fact that there are instances where children fall through the crack, where the telephone is not answered, where we're too busy. Family Justice Center, I will make sure as a circuit court judge that it is working. As far as a judge lobbying politically, judges are not allowed to do that. And therefore, I can assure you that the best interest of the child will be my most important role, because a child growing up, most of them, if they have problems at their home, they do not function well in school, and they have mental issues, healthcare issues later on in life.
Thank you, sir. Judge Berry.
Yes, thank you. So as a citizen, certainly I can exercise my right to vote. I can contact my person, my delegate, my senator. Under the Code of Judicial Conduct, I cannot use the prestige of my office to support my own political beliefs. We have to be impartial. We took an oath to support the laws that are in place. It erodes faith in the judicial system when you personally comment on laws that you have to enforce. With respect to domestic violence, the district and circuit courts are both working to ensure that domestic violence victims are protected during COVID-19. There are still hearings for domestic violence victims. The Family Justice Center is just one of the resources available to those victims. They have comprehensive services, including assistance with safety planning and protective orders, legal assistance, counseling. There's also the Montgomery County Crisis Center that can do a number of things, including help with shelter placement. You can file domestic violence petitioners with the commissioner day and night, 24 hours a day, and those petitions are being heard and decided. So no one vulnerable to abuse is asked or expected to stay in danger without recourse or protection.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Pierre.
Yes. Yes, the courts are open for domestic violence cases. The Family Justice Center is open, and Child Protective Services is also open. That's the good news. The bad news is that if a person is over 18 years old, Child Protective Services really cannot do that much for them unless they were already in the system. The shelters are overwhelmed, and they've been overwhelmed before. When I was chair of the Montgomery County Criminal Justice Coordinating Commission, we talked about shelters and we talked about mental health facilities and how the people who needed them on an emergency basis, and there never seems to be enough room available for those people. So it makes it very difficult with COVID-19 to add to that burden as well. When you're not safe in your house and you feel like civil disobedience is your only recourse, it's really, really sad. I do a lot of juvenile cases and I work with a lot of young children, and there's nothing worse than having a person who does not feel safe in his or her own home because there's nowhere to run to. If you feel safe outside of your house, you could run inside and into safety. But if you do not feel safe outside of your house, you have no place to run. What I would suggest to these young people who are using civil disobedience is to contact me. I have my email address on Facebook, as well as I have my email address as part of this as well. Contact me, email me, call me, and I could give some resources to you, so that way you don't have to resort to civil disobedience to do this. So that way you could find a place where you will be safe.
Thank you. So the next question, I'm going to give you each 1 minute to respond to it. And I'm going to reverse the order. And so we'll start with Ms. Pierre and we'll go backwards. This question is, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacles or impediments to justice, if anything at all? Ms. Pierre.
I perceive so many things as obstacles to justice that it is really hard to choose just one. What I mean by that is that as someone who's been practicing law for over 28 years, who has been in front of numerous judges in numerous jurisdictions, there are just so many improvements that could happen in the court system that it is just hard to choose one. What I mean by that is you have some judges who are rude and who are just awful to people the minute they walk into the courtroom. You find that it's really, really difficult for them to talk about why it is that they are in court because they're just so intimidated by the judges. And if you know what if you want to know what I mean, there is a website called The Roving Room, and that will tell you some of the difficulties that people have faced.
Sorry,
so if you go to,
your time has expired there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Judge Berry.
All right. So I think that probably the greatest obstacle really is access to our justice system. And we work every day to ensure that people do have access. There are a number of things that can impede that access. For example, not being able to afford attorneys. We have multiple services for pro se parties who don't have attorneys to help them to understand the law and the system and things that they need to do. But there's still some gaps in that. There's still folks that come to court and just don't understand, either they haven't taken advantage of those services or they didn't get what they needed. An impediment could be also language barriers, just not understanding the system. We in Montgomery County offer the interpreter services.
Judge Berry.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Having worked for legal aid, we had the saying, equal justice for all. That meant that everybody, no matter what your station was in life, should have access to the courts. One of the things that keeps us from having access to the courts is finances, representation, in terms of being able. And you know, it's always economics, and especially for minorities. And I'm not talking about only African Americans. In Montgomery County, we're a diverse county, so we should have the availability to have access to the courts, whether it's pro bono, and some judges. Thank you.
Okay, so when I raise my hands, you've got 10 seconds left.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I have to jump right off.
Okay, well, anyway, the bottom line is accessibility and ability to afford an attorney to resolve your issues before a judge.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Judge Boynton.
Thank you. A couple of things that I've seen over my 17 years of being on the bench. First is language barriers. Montgomery County has people from all around the world living here. So to deal with that problem, we have full-time interpreters, and I think we provide 17 or 18 different languages to people coming to court. We have money is a barrier to getting justice, and as a result of that, we have the public defender's office, we have legal aid, we have pro bono services to assist with that. Immigration status can be a barrier for certain people, and to deal with that, Montgomery County is a sanctuary county, and where there's cultural barriers that can lead to some issues there, and we have the most diverse bench in Montgomery County that we've ever had. So we're working hard to deal with overcoming those obstacles to justice.
Thank you, sir. Judge Fogleman.
Access and mental health are among the greatest obstacles to justice here in Montgomery County and statewide. Those are issues about which I'm very concerned. I was appointed to a statewide commission of the judiciary that deals specifically with access to the courts, and we meet regularly and address those issues on a regular basis. Also, I was appointed to our mental health court here in Montgomery County, and we work with individuals who end up in the criminal justice system who are suffering from mental health issues. And we work with them to make sure that their needs are met and the safety of the community is ensured at the same time. That is a careful balancing that we must do in that court. And I think a specialty court like the mental health court is one of the ways that we try to address these obstacles to justice. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Judge McAuliffe.
Yes, I agree with the points that have been made, and it's largely about money. When people can't afford a lawyer and they're really not prepared or able to handle it themselves. But we do provide services to people, and some of those have been mentioned. I want to talk about one other obstacle that I see, and that's fear. As Judge Boynton mentioned, we're a sanctuary county. If you come to court and you seek justice, if you seek domestic violence order against someone, your citizenship is not going to be questioned. But you know what? The fear is still there. We have large sections of our community. There's Central American folks who are afraid to go to court because they're afraid of what might happen to them. And I think even we can tell them all we want that nothing's going to happen. We don't treat people that way in Montgomery County, but the fear is real. And the fear is something we're going to spend a long time overcoming. Montgomery County didn't create it, but we have to deal with it.
Thank you, sir. Next question. I'm going to also give you a minute to respond to this one. And we will continue with the same order we just had, starting with Ms. Pierre. Describe a situation where you had to support a legal position that conflicted with your personal beliefs. And tell us a little bit about how you handled it. Ms. Pierre.
I have always believed in the judicial system, and I have done that by representing people I don't necessarily agree with. I represented people in statutory rape cases. I represented people in substance abuse cases, all sorts of cases where I don't necessarily agree with the action that the person had done. The way that I have handled it is to say that what I learned in law school was proper. Yes, I might not like what the person did personally, but that person still has a right to be represented and represented in the best way possible by the best lawyer possible. What I mean by that is once you start pulling back as an advocate and say to yourself, well, I'm not going to do my best to represent this person, then that becomes problematic. But as a judge, what you do is you don't do that. You sit back and you listen to the evidence, and the evidence is what rules your decision.
Thank you, ma'am. Judge Berry.
Thank you. There are multiple instances, particularly when you're in private practice, where the position of your client is contrary to your own personal beliefs, and you are required to do what your client has asked you to do, unless they're asking you to do something that is contrary to the rules of your own professional responsibility. And so I recall one instance where a client wanted to renege on an agreement, and he required me to go to court and make the argument. And I talked to everyone I could to ask, do I have to do this? And the answer from the ethics experts was, you don't have a basis not to do it. And so I did. I argued that case, and I argued it well, because that was my job.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Johnson.
I've had an instance where in private practice, a client had made some derogatory remarks, and I had to represent this client. My personal beliefs do not come into play, because the person had a right to court. He had a right to appear before a judge, and I had a right to give him zealous representation. Those are my legal duties. I do not take things personally. As a judge, I will not take anything personally. It would be my duties to carry out my duties as a judge, and not to have my personal beliefs in my decisions.
Thank you, sir. My putting my hands up disrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Good. I've learned. I only got 10 seconds.
Judge Boynton.
This is a question that's really geared towards lawyers, because as judges, we don't really take legal positions. But when I was a lawyer, I represented people in court that had done things that I personally disagreed with, but I defended them zealously because they were guaranteed right under the Constitution to be protected and to have the case proven against them. This question sort of comes up in a different context when you're a judge, however, because you may have people that are appearing in front of you that are either lawyers and or litigants or witnesses that you may personally not like. You may not like the way they've conducted themselves or acted or testified in court, but you can't allow that to influence what you do in court with the decision, because your decision has to be based upon the facts and the law, and not how you may personally feel about the litigant or the lawyer in front of you. So that's probably the main way that this question would come up as a judge.
Thank you, sir. Judge Fogleman.
Thank you. So I spent 3 years as an assistant public defender here in Montgomery County, and there were times where people would ask me, how do you defend somebody who every part of your being tells you is guilty? And my response was always the same. If everybody does his or her job in the system, the right result should come about. And so that's the way I handled it. I represented people who every part of my being suggested that they were guilty of what they were charged with, but it was up to the state to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. We have a judge who has a job to do. We have a jury that had a job to do. And I think my view always was, I did my job, I did it zealously, and it's up to the other participants in the system to do their jobs as well. We do have ethical obligations as lawyers. It's very different as a judge, obviously, as Judge Boynton pointed out. We don't involve our decision-making with personal beliefs, and we don't consider that at all in our decision-making.
My apologies. I ignored the clock that time.
Oh, I got a little extra.
Judge McAuliffe.
Yes, when you had a practice like mine, I'll just give you, it says a situation, so I'll give you one of many, okay? I represented a young man who killed 3 people in Olney. 2 of those people were the sons of very prominent lawyers. There was a community backlash like I've never seen against this young man. I got hate mail every day. My children were harassed at school. I had somebody break into my house just because they were so angry that I was representing this young man. Sometimes the community can turn on somebody like that. But you know what? You know how I handled it? You fight. You fight for that person, because when you're a lawyer, that's what you do. He was counting on me. And just because society maybe decided he wasn't so valuable doesn't change anything. You have to show courage and you have to defend that young man. And that's how I handled it. Now, that doesn't exactly happen as a judge, but that's how I handled it as a lawyer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so I'm going to ask one last question before we go to our closing wrap up. If you guys, are you up for one last question?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you. And we'll continue with the order that we're using, starting with Ms. Pierre. Do you believe that there is underrepresentation of women or people of color in the court system? If so, how would you work to correct the problem? Ms. Pierre.
Yes, I do believe that there is underrepresentation of women and people of color in the court system. Let's take Montgomery County, for instance. The Governor Hogan, in the past, 5 years that he has been in office, has not appointed an African-American male in the circuit, in any court in Montgomery County. So for the past 5 years, the Montgomery County Circuit Court, where the most heinous crimes are heard, has not had an African-American male. And in addition to that, I think that the sort of people who get appointed are the ones who are believed to follow the party line when it comes to cases. I think that the diversity in terms of thought is really important. And I don't think that diversity has been addressed at all in the court system.
Thank you, ma'am. Judge Berry.
Thank you. So as I mentioned before, I was a member of the Governor's Trial Courts Nominating Commission, and the Governor Hogan was looking for a diverse commission. He was looking for people of color and other diverse backgrounds to be a part of that commission, and I was chosen to do that. I'll point out that Governor Hogan, 10 out of the 18 appointments that he's made to the Montgomery County District and Circuit Court, those have been women, and 1/3 of those appointments have been people of color. I'll also point out that in this last round of vacancies, the last 2 vacancies that I and Judge McAuliffe have taken, there were no other applicants of color. So I think, yes, there remains an underrepresentation of people of color. Not so much women, we're on the circuit court, we're almost 50-50, and certainly the appointments were primarily women. And we need to work on that. We need to encourage more people to get involved in positions of governance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnston.
Yes, I do believe there's an underrepresentation of people. And it is because there have been applicants like myself who have gone up 6 times and have been passed over. I have no friends, no relatives, no former law partners that would assist me. When I went up without the influence of anyone. We have been talking about solving the problems, but there has not been any action. Judge Eric Johnson was the last African-American judge appointed. It took him 6 times to get appointed. He went up 6 times. I've gone up 6 times, 3 times for the district court, court of appeals, and the circuit court 2 times, and have been passed over. My qualifications speak for themselves.
Thank you, sir. Judge Boynton.
I guess what I would say is that it's sort of a 2-part question. Both the district court and the circuit court benches are practically evenly divided, 50-50 between men and women. And the district court, which has had many more openings in the last few years, I believe has 2 white males and the rest are all minorities. And so it's kind of hard to say that there hasn't been recent activity to deal with that problem that has existed from decades in the past. I find it interesting that the two candidates tonight are complaining about this, and they didn't even apply for the positions for which Judge Berry, Judge McAuliffe, and Judge Fogleman were appointed. But I think the way to deal with it is we as judges have the ability to mentor young lawyers to get them interested in becoming on the bench, to get them involved in bar activities, to make them better lawyers, so that when they get to the age of experience and they are minorities or lawyers of color, that they'll be appropriately experienced and have the right ability to get through the commission and be approved.
I'm sorry, I guess I was intrigued and listening and I didn't pay attention to the clock. Judge Fogleman.
We lose Judge Fogleman.
Judge Fogleman. Okay, there you are, sir.
Thank you. For some reason, I couldn't unmute it at that time. I appreciate that. There is to the extent that there is a problem, it needs to be addressed at an earlier stage. So that means in our law schools, where, by the way, now in most of the law schools, women outnumber men. I think the lack of women in the court system is being rectified. But with respect to people of color, there are scholarships that are being offered by the Montgomery County Bar Association to try to get more representation. There are also other programs. There are mentoring programs that are out there to try to get people. I know the County Bar Association has a leadership program to try to develop people that would be good people to serve in these judgeships, and people that are trained and people that have those skills. So, and as Judge Boynton pointed out, when I applied in December of 2018.
Judge Fogleman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge McAuliffe.
Yes, thank you. As far as underrepresentation of women, I don't see that, because I think it's right around 50-50 when you add in all the judges in Montgomery County. It's right about half and half. As far as people of color, there is a problem in the sense of being underrepresented, but that's got to be addressed by the law practice, by the law schools, by generating young people who are interested in doing this, by generating people who have the right experience and have the right education and the right qualifications. Mr. Johnson mentioned Eric Johnson, who's a dear friend. Actually, he was one of the people who told me I should apply for the court. He wrote letters for me to help support me. And people like Eric Johnson can be role models to young people of color. I think that's an important consideration, and we're doing what we can, but I think role models and encouraging people, young lawyers, to get more involved is the solution. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I certainly appreciate your time and attention to this opportunity to come before the electorate of Montgomery County. And I hope they have heard sufficiently from you that they would want to participate in this election, and that would be an informed decision for them. I want to give each of you, starting in the order that we began with, Judge McAuliffe, Judge Fogleman, then Judge Boynton, Mr. Johnson, Judge Berry, and Ms. Pierre, a chance for 1 minute closing remarks, summation, if you will.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, one thing that people should understand, the viewers should understand, is that the four sitting judges here, Judge Fogleman, myself, Judge Boynton, and Judge Berry, all went through the merit system process. We were all vetted, and the vetting process is extensive. We've got all sorts of descriptions on our website. I can't really do it in 1 minute. But all of these steps were taken to make sure we are the most highly qualified people. They investigate every part of your life. They talk to every lawyer you ever had a case against. They talk to every judge you had a case before. and they want to know whether these people are properly qualified. There are all sorts of bar associations, minority bar associations, women's bar associations. They want to know whether the person is proper to be on the bench. Do they have integrity? Do they have the temperament? Do they have the professionalism? Are they ready to become a judge? They want to know whether you are the right person to make serious decisions. All 4 sitting judges went through that, and all 4 of us were found highly qualified and selected. The challengers were not.
Thank you, Judge McAuliffe. Judge
Thank you.
Fogleman.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make sure that I let people know what I'm about, because I think it's important for people to understand where their judges come from. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, I grew up without a father, without any real examples in my family of anyone who had had a professional degree or gone to college even. I was the first in my family to go to college. I put myself through college on loans, as well as through law school. I don't say that to say I had a difficult or horrible upbringing, but I say that so that people can understand that I do emphasize and empathize with people who are in difficult circumstances. I can understand where they come from. I think I can relate to that. And I think that factors into who I am as a judge and how I do my job as a judge.
Thank you so much. Judge Boynton.
Sorry, I just unmuted. So I've been on the bench for 17 years, and in closing, I think I'll read a letter that I received 4 days ago from a crack cocaine addict I met in my courtroom back in 2007, and who I haven't seen in 3 years since her probation ended. I think she's an African-American female who today is 61 years old and can probably state it better than I can. Dear Honorable Judge Boynton, I'm writing you to thank you for giving me another chance and for seeing something in me I didn't see in myself, and for believing in me time and time again. You gave me chances so many times. The last thing you've done for me was putting me in St. Luke's house. I went from St. Luke's house to Cornerstone, Montgomery, and I'm still there. This was the best thing you did for me. I'm clean and sober and have been for years. I had intentions on sending you this letter and card for years, so here I am. I am working, and what you did for me was a blessing. I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you for not giving up on me and not sending me to jail. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
I've heard the judge say that I haven't been vetted or Mrs. Pierre hasn't been vetted. We went through the vetting process ourselves, but we didn't have friends on the committees. We didn't have law partners on the committees. I went through the various different bar associations, and like I say, they were friends for most of these 4 judges. Anyway, my court will be recognized for honesty, integrity, and fairness, and all who come before me will be treated with dignity and respect. I look forward to and appreciate your support. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present myself. Thank you, Reverend Moultrie, and thank you, Ms. Powell.
Thank you so much. Judge Berry.
Thank you very much. I want to say that I love my job. I'm so proud to have made it here. I worked very hard to get here throughout my career. I was vetted like the 4 sitting judges, and it was an extraordinary vetting process over multiple months with multiple bar associations that represent multiple demographics. And I love being a representative of the judiciary and having a chance to show people that we can provide great service. It's rewarding to listen to the stories. It can be heartbreaking and complicated, but it's rewarding to find a way to resolve those disputes. This job is extremely challenging, but I'm happy. I'm grateful for those who vetted us, those who are interested in not only diversifying the bench, but finding the best judges to sit on the bench. I hope the voters do the same and allow me and my colleagues on the bench to continue doing this important work.
Thank you, Judge Berry. And Ms. Pierre.
We are told that judges who have gone through the merit process are experienced, vetted, and approved. We are told that they are actually there because the process is based on merit. The process is not based on merit. Like Mr. Johnson says, the process is based on who you know. And unfortunately, that is why when you go to the robingroom.com, you see that so many of the so-called vetted judges ranked so low. For instance, when you go to the robing room, you'll find out of the 42 judges who are listed in there from Montgomery County, 24 of them have failing grades. So if you were to go to a restaurant with failing grades, would you eat at that restaurant? No, you wouldn't. You would say to yourself, I'm going to go someplace else. I'm going to try another process to try a different restaurant. This is what Mr. Johnson and I are saying. We're saying that the process sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, thank you. Your time is up and my time is up. I thank you all so very, very much, and I really appreciate your willingness to be before this virtual audience and be transparent. I wish you all well and great success and the opportunity to serve in every capacity that our God allows. I'm going to allow Miss Anita Neal to come over and give some remarks, and then we will be done.
Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to thank each of you for your time and participation to share with us your views and your perspective of opinion of being elected to the office that you have chosen. The purpose of this forum is to educate our voters on the candidates of their choice. I want to remind you that this forum is hosted by the Mount Calvary Baptist Church and the Lincoln Park Historical Foundation. It is being recorded live and will be available for your view to share with others as you wish. We want to make sure that you not only turn in your ballot for June 2nd, but that you would also vote for yourself. We want to make sure that when this video is viewed by others, that they will be able to look at you more deeply to figure out if you're the best person for the position, because we want to be represented by those who care for all voters without any prejudice whatsoever. So again, we want to thank you for joining us and being a part of this virtual conference webinar. This is our first one. In terms, we will be doing more. I've had an enjoyable time talking and chatting with each one of you online. I know you received a lot of messages, so we wanted to make sure that this would go smoothly for all. And again, I want to thank you. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you and good night.
Night.
Bottom right-hand corner,